Let's talk about some other news. An article that was written this morning on The Athletic, and a guy that we have featured last week, and I have not had a chance to talk with Brody, but he came on with you guys to talk about Will Wade and the story developing on the basketball side of things that he had written about the LSU Bengal Tigers. You know, we have featured 3 LSU guys this week, and we're only at Wednesday. Brody Miller, welcome back into the LSU show in Tuscaloosa. I hope you're having a great day.
I'm doing all right. I really appreciate you having me on again.
Hey, and I'm not joking with you either, man, because we have featured 3 LSU people this week. So you're the third, and we still got 2 more days to go. So Brody, and we do cover a lot of LSU. I mean, believe it or not, there is some fans here that do pull for the Tigers in this area, and we get just enough to stir up the Alabama fans. But Brody, let's talk about maybe what you've learned about Coach O and some of the inner workings of that locker room. Kind of fill us in. We want people to go to the website and read the complete article, but kind of give us some maybe basic summaries of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically, it's been a tricky month over there at LSU, and granted, it's been a tricky month for just about every program in the country, but it's been, a little tense there, maybe more than some others, because I think it all kind of, you have 4 players opting out so far, including 2 of your biggest NFL prospects, and in Jamar Chase and Tyler Shelvin. So those are obviously huge losses. And you have, a handful of players transferring out. And granted, other than Justin Thomas, I'm not sure any of those guys would have started, but still, there are more losses. And then obviously now you have players only protest, which again falls in the category of that's happening all around the country. But the big news of that was, they didn't even tell Ed Ogeron about it, and he was kind of blindsided and walked into a team meeting at 1:30, and only 6 players were there. And then, and then you also have, and this isn't, again, not specific to LSU, but then you also have, pretty much the entire offensive line except 4 players were either tested positive or quarantined due to COVID-19 exposure. So they pretty much went a week of practice without an offensive line, and those guys are back now. But all of this is just to say it's been a wild week in Baton Rouge, and, I think there is some tension there, and I think, as I'm sure you'll want to talk about, a lot of the tension really, I think, stems from about a month ago. Ed Ogeron was on Fox News, which he's done a few times this summer, and kind of after being pressed for a little while, was, said, I love President Trump. And regardless of anyone's politics or where you stand, for a locker room of, primarily black athletes, that really rubbed a lot of them the wrong way, and I think it's kind of created a tension there, and I think you're kind of starting to see it hit the last few weeks. But Ed Ogeron, in his defense, has yesterday spoke to the media and kind of talked about how he needs to, be more conscious of these things and listen to his players and be more empathetic to what they're dealing with. So it does seem like he's making moves to try to ease some of these tensions. But it's going to be a tricky few weeks in Baton Rouge.
Let's take it prior to this pandemic, because, when I called you and asked for an interview, and even I was driving on the road and my Bluetooth took over and I was trying to text you and ended up calling you, you called me back, and I appreciate the call, and I appreciate you coming on for a couple of minutes. But even going back to March the 15th, 16th, 17th, when all this started to break out, it's been a lot of polarizing topics, right? COVID, how real is it? Do you wear a mask? Do you do this? Social distancing, shut it down. There's a lot of people that are divided. But as I look at this team, going into that pandemic, it's hard to defend a national title. Go get people who have won multiple national titles, and they'll tell you the second one is more difficult than the first one because you get that complacency sets in. You hear how great you are, even though those players, a lot of those guys have departed the NFL. Even if none of these distractions had happened, it was going to be a management side of this for Coach O to come off of a historic season. Would you agree?
Of course, that's definitely a challenge, and something I know he put a lot of thought into, and even did kind of get his staff to a big study on basically teams defending national titles and what mistakes people have made and what lessons people have taken from trying to defend national titles and how you go about it. And he said the biggest takeaway they got from all these teams and coaches and players was you can't mention last year, and that's the biggest mistake you make. You should not mention last year. I don't even know how they were handling it before because a pandemic did hit, and all of these things did happen. So it's almost hard to predict. But I think this was always going to be kind of a year of playing with house money a little bit. I don't think anybody expected them to repeat this year. I don't think anybody was realistically expecting them to be, before the pandemic, a top 4 team or anything like that making the playoffs. So it was a tricky spot, but I think really what all people really wanted was to say, hey, can this team still be a top, 8 team and get a New Year's Six bowl? Can you reload? Can you keep that culture going? I think that's what everyone's looking to see. And I mean, if I'm being honest, my indications were, I thought this team was going to be pretty good. I thought this was going to be, not a playoff team, but a top 7 team or something like that and go 10-2 or so. And, I really thought they had that. And now with just everything going on, it does look like it's getting a little tricky over there.
Can Coach O navigate the waters to get this locker room back?
See, that's the $1 million question. And this is where I will give him the benefit of the doubt. And the fact is, the one thing that I have written about at length and my colleagues have written about at length, and probably us as much as any outlet, when people ask me what Ed Orgeron's greatest strength is, I've always said he's really good at listening, knowing he's not the smartest guy in the room, and adapting to what he needs to adapt to. That is something I will always give him credit for. That's why I think they won the national titles, because he always did listen to the people in his room. And, that's why he went from being one of the biggest failures in college football to National Coach of the Year, because he understands I'm not always going to be right, and he listens and he adapts. So I say all that to say this is the biggest moment he'll probably ever have to do that, right? Where he will have to listen to his players, adapt, understand that he made a mistake here, and that, that in terms of, at least in terms of just managing a locker room, and really understand that you need to listen, you need to empathize with your players and just kind of change your style a little bit. And I do have faith he can do that, just because history says that's the number one thing he does well. So I think he will. I think it'll take a little time. And I do have to preface all of this with saying, I think there's tension there. I think there's problems. I think there's some stuff that's going to make this year tough, but I'm not hitting the panic button over there. I think, I think there's tension. I don't think there's a mutiny. I think there will be okay in the grand scheme of things, especially if Orgeron, which it seems like he is it makes the right moves and kind of handles things. But yeah, this might not be another title season or anything like that.
Brody, let me ask you, because we look at coaches, and trust me, we've had Nick Saban doing a public appearance, a march here on the campus of the University of Alabama, left the football building. They worked their way to Foster Auditorium. They stood in front of a microphone. They voiced their concerns. There's been a lot of things thrown at Nick Saban here from a local standpoint. It's a very polarizing topic. It is. It's a political season. I get it. But it's like right now, looking at all these different coaches inside that locker room, it's a very difficult manage, regardless if you're a national championship football team. If you're on the worst team in college football, you've got to be able to get all 100 guys to believe in one common goal. Well, in our business, Brody, how about we put 100 media guys in a room and there's one guy that's in charge to get us all to think the same way? That would be a challenge within itself.
Yep. No, it's a fantastic way to put it. And the way I've almost started to say it today is a head coach doesn't need to be political about things, but being a head coach is being a politician. That's a fact. Because guess what? You are recruiting. That is the same thing as trying to get voters and get swayed faces
Sure.
and whatnot. You have to keep an entire team in line. All these things. So you are a politician. And regardless of whether or not you agree with what Orgeron says, or regardless of whether or not you think he should be allowed to have his opinions, and of course he should. But you can't also act like that it's wrong if the people who follow him are upset by that opinion. There's still going to be consequences to saying that. It's not that he's not allowed to have the opinion. It's that he can't then be upset if a lot of his locker room is upset about that. That's not right or wrong. It's just how things are. And, so that's a tricky thing here. So I think it is a challenge, and it's something that it's just a reality, and it's always been a reality. There's always a chance you upset your team by saying certain things. That's not new. But now in 2020, more than ever, there is no division between politics and sports and all of these things. They are all completely intertwined. So you know what? You do have to worry about keeping your players happy. And if you are going to lead a program of, just if we're being honest, primarily black men and recruiting a lot of black men, you have to think about that, because if they're upset with you, there's going to be repercussions.
Brody, stop and talk about the article, because I know we've talked about it, but there's no way that we can squeeze in the complete article in just a short amount of time. Kind of preview how folks can go subscribe to the content. And it's not just your content, but it's content around the sports world. But as our focus is on college football, you guys have got some outstanding writers and people who cover this university and all around the SEC. But you cover LSU. Talk about the website, The Athletic.
Yeah, I mean, The Athletic is pretty much a national website. That's the kind of the beauty of it is you might be subscribing for your local Alabama writer, Auburn writer, and Aaron Suttles, but at the end of the day, you're not just subscribing to him. You're subscribing to our entire, 500 reporter, website of the best NFL, NBA, college basketball, college football, MLB writers. So you're getting the entire national outlet. So it really is money's worth, and it's just pretty much for the price of a cup of coffee a month. So you can subscribe at theathletic.com. And to be honest, I don't have a code on top of me right now, but you can usually pretty easily look and find 30 or 40% off a subscription somewhere with a code. So, definitely check us out.
Hey, Brody, one quick question. I know you're a college football guy. What's the chances of we pulling this thing off in 24 days? What's your barometer?
I think I've come to a pretty solid conclusion that the SEC is just going to push through. I genuinely believe at this point that they understand there's going to be cases, there's going to be challenges, there's probably even going to be a few canceled games, but they just are accepting there's risk and that there's going to be tough weeks. But I honestly am at the point where I think they're just going to roll through and make it happen. So I'm not even saying right or wrong, but I do think it's going to happen.
Brody Miller. Connect with him on the Twitter side of things. Brody A. Miller. He's the LSU beat reporter for The Athletic, breaking the story around LSU and Coach O and some tension in that locker room. I think that'd be the nice way to put it there. Brody, thank you again for jumping on for a couple of minutes, especially on such a short notice. I've enjoyed the conversation. I hope our paths will cross again in the future. Thank you.
I really enjoyed it as well, Ryan. Take care. Thanks.
Thank you. Brody Miller from The Athletic talking about a story where Coach O voiced his opinion and now is having to manage the water